I actually am very much in favor of a trade war with China, and not because I like tariffs at all. I don't, but because for the last 30 years, China has been stealing our technology again and again and again, and then taking it from us, building products, selling them back to us.
Welcome to the Oracle by Polymarket. I'm Will Ward.
And I'm Mahdi Ali.
And today we're on with Porter Stansberry, the founder of Stansberry Investment Research, which is one of the biggest private U.S. investment advisory firms in the U.S. Porter, how's it going?
I'm
Welcome
doing
back.
great, Will. Thanks, man. It's Masters week, so I'm kind of casual today. I'm sporting my Masters green here, and mostly watching golf today. But happy to chat with you guys.
All right. We want to get into tariffs, winners and losers, all that good stuff. But let's start out with this prediction you put out on X about 10 days ago. U.S. going to default on its debt within 4 years. Can you walk us through this thesis? What are the warning signs? When do we head to the bunkers?
I think it's a really simple thesis, which is we are, pissing on all of our trading partners' Cheerios, and those are also our creditors. So we've got to refi 9 trillion this year, and let's say we do another 2 or 3 trillion in deficit on top of that. So we got to come up with more than 10 trillion. We only have 5 trillion in domestic savings. What's the solution to that? Well, you could obviously have much higher interest rates, which would drive capital out of equity and into treasury debt. So that'd be yields at what, 7-8%, something like that. Wouldn't be very good for the economy. Or you can have our foreign creditors help us out. And you saw this week with Japan starting to sell the 10-year, rates went 4.5%, and the president blinked, thankfully, and called a pause to the tariffs because we need our foreign creditors. So these problems, though, are only going to get worse. And what I hear, the refrain I hear a lot is, well, that's okay because we can just print the money because we owe it to ourselves. Well, the problem is that the off-balance sheet obligations, the 70 trillion, which is the current net present value of what Social Security actually owes as of today, not future liabilities, what they owe today, $70 trillion. And they have automatic annual cost of living adjustments. So the more that you print to refi the 10 trillion, the debt is going to grow because the net present value of that 70 trillion is going to increase by another 5% or 10%. And so we're backed into a corner where the only way to really get control of the federal budget is going to be to reform the entitlement programs. And as you guys all know, that is a political non-starter. And so I think we're backing ourselves into a corner where there's not going to be any escape. And so they will either have to default on the promises they've made according to the entitlement programs, or they're going to have to default in the treasury market. One way or the other, it's going to happen.
Do you think someone's going to bite the bullet there in the Trump administration or the Trump administration on a whole on entitlements, or do you think they're going to try to push other levers to try to make that happen?
I don't think there's any way that they're going to touch the entitlements. And so they're going to have to try to push other levers. And what they're trying to do right now is vastly expand the tax base, doing so indirectly through tariffs, which is a really bad idea for all kinds of reasons that we don't need to get into today. But one of the pretty much the entire reason our economy is so dynamic is because we're the beneficiaries of so many different comparative advantages in trade. What I hear so much is, well, how bad could tariffs be if Europe has them, if Japan has them, if everyone else has them? And I'm like, have you been to those places? Do you want to have those economies? Go ahead. Europe hasn't grown. Italy and per capita GDP has not grown in 20 years. Neither has Japan.
Can you
These
explain
countries
to
are
me
more
Trump's
bound.
fascination? What's Trump's fascination with tariffs? Do you sort of understand that?
I think that listen, I don't really know. I've spoken to Trump. I'm actually a fan of him personally. I think he really loves our country. I think he's trying his best to do what's right for America. And I think he's kind of a hero and a patriot. I really am fond of him personally. But I really don't think he understands a couple of important basic economic concepts. And I'm glad that his Treasury Secretary does. We've got the best Treasury Secretary we've ever had. So I wouldn't be surprised if they can pull a rabbit out of a hat for another year or two. But these problems are not going to go away. And I got a couple of predictions for you. Number one is government spending will not decline. That will not happen. And number two, we will continue to have larger budget deficits. That will happen too. People don't realize that 80% of the spending is mandatory spending, and it's in these programs that all have cost of living adjustments. So you can't print them away. We've got to deal with this issue. And if we decide to deal with it by trying to raise taxes, whether they're tariffs or whether they're income taxes, it will fail because it's going to wreck the economy.
Let me ask you this. So in a previous life, I worked in the financial newsletter publishing industry, and I actually studied your sales letter, The End of America, which was like one of the best legendary sort of like newsletter promos of all time. And in that, you paint this kind of dire scenario of the US dollar ending the world reserve currency status. But now you've got people like Stephen Moran. You have this thing in the White House that came out.
Trump's
saying
trying to do that on purpose.
Saying we want to do that. Yeah. So
it's
like
crazy.
This was like the end of the world scenario. And now they're doing it on purpose. So what changed?
I wrote this on Twitter. The stuff that I saw this week coming out of the Trump administration was truly the craziest stuff I've ever seen, ever, from any administration ever. All time crazy. Peter Navarro, the idea that you're going to get rid of every single individual country's trade deficit and that somehow that would be good for America, that is absolutely bonkers. We print dollars and then we exchange those dollars for valuable goods and services. And the ability to do that is the most valuable commodity in the modern world. If we get rid of that, my prediction of our default is going to accelerate to not 4 years, it'll be 4 months. There is no way we can finance $36 trillion without the world's reserve currency. No way. And I'll tell you guys, like just look at Bank of America's balance sheet. If you look at Bank of America's balance sheet, you will find they own $500 billion worth of treasury bonds that have less than a 1% coupon, which means the value of those bonds, if we have to try to finance at 7 or 8%, value of those bonds is zero. And Bank of America will be insolvent. And do you think that ATMs will work? Do you think that the financial system will work if Bank of America fails? People just honestly have no idea how fragile our economy is because of how in debt our government is.
Yeah. So in a scenario where the US, or I guess the people that say, hey, not so fast, we're not going to lose a reserve currency, they'll kind of make this argument that, okay, we've got problems, but what are you going to do? Use the euro? What are you going to do? Use the yuan? Like none of these are viable options. You're going to do Bitcoin. Okay, good luck with that. What does the world look like? What's the most likely
Fellas,
runner-up
let me
here?
just ask you a simple question. It's just a simple question. Simple. If I was going to hire you guys to come work at my firm right now, and I said I gave you two choices, I'll pay you in dollars or I'll pay you in Bitcoin, what would you want?
Bitcoin.
Me too. The solution is right in front of our eyes, and everyone's already using it.
So what does that world look like? What does the hyper-Bitcoinized world look like?
Well, there's going to be a default. The US dollar is on its way out as the world's reserve currency, whether we have knuckleheads who do it on purpose or we have a credit default. That's absolutely going to happen. And I wrote that report 15 years ago. And what I wrote, if you go back and read it, it talks about how when societies begin to print to pay for their obligations, what happens is more than financial damage. What happens is societal damage. All kinds of bad problems start to emerge. Anomie is what sociologists call it. But it's things like drug addiction. It's things like prostitution. It's things like gambling. It's things like growth in violence and political disunity. And if you look at what's happened in America the last 15 years, you see all of that. Guys, how many college girls are now prostitutes on OnlyFans? That didn't exist 20 years ago. How many people do you know who have gotten addicted to morphine in one type or another over the last 15 years? Stuff I never saw before, ever. Sure, in college, people doing marijuana, people doing blow, people doing morphine. What? Never saw it. I had a guy in my own company who, one of our customer service reps, had a morphine overdose, had a fentanyl event at work. What is this stuff? It's craziness. And then, you guys don't remember this, but I wrote all that before America lost its AAA credit rating. I wrote all that before Occupy Wall Street. I wrote all that, before the craziness we've seen in our politics, just complete insanity. And all that is because our society is unraveling. And that, of course, will make it harder for us to finance all these
Porter,
obligations as well.
I want you to steel man the other side. What does it look like to break out of this? Why are you wrong?
Well, I'm wrong because America is an enormous economy, is enormously wealthy. We can destroy our currency. We could even destroy our financial system, but we're still going to have all of our natural resources. We're still going to have the biggest, largest market, the most educated people, and hopefully the most freedom. The real problem is not these financial problems. The real problem is what the financial problems cause, because instead of addressing them, you've got people will do everything else. Have you guys ever known anyone that had like a debt problem or a gambling problem? They'll do anything except for pay you back.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. Like, you wouldn't be in this position if just a couple months ago you'd stop doubling down, you moron. And but we don't if the president walked out there tomorrow and said, "Guys, look, we're broke. There's no way we can do this. We've made you a bunch of promises. We have to renege on them. We can't destroy our entire society just because we promised that you can retire when you're 55 old."
Porter, don't you
So
think
we got to change all that. And
so
by the way, if we did all that, man, we would be fine. Can you imagine what a country America would be if they said, "Look, we're going to cut the top tax rate from 54% to 24%. Boom. We're gonna move retirement from 65 to 75. Boom. Our economy would absolutely blow up. There's all kinds of ways I can be wrong, but I'm not going to be wrong because the only thing an American politician will not do is tell his constituents the truth.
So I mean, it feels like, the first step would just be cut the cost of living adjustments, slow down the rate of entitlement growth, and that way the growth of the money supply doesn't have to go exponential and it can eventually flatline, right? We can plateau. Does that
You guys know how they elect popes?
Yeah,
The smoke.
the
Yeah.
smoke, yeah.
Yeah.
They lock them all in a room and they say you can't come out until you fucking elect a pope because we need a pope. We can't have a church without a pope, and we're tired of you guys bickering about it. So why don't we just lock all the damn congressmen in the building and tell them you don't get to come out until you've passed an actual balanced budget? Go for it. I don't care who wins or who loses. Just stop spending money that we don't have and there's no way we can afford. Stop it.
But Porter, what about DOGE? They've cut $84,000 for a business incubator making organic shea butter in Burkina Faso. Isn't that going to move the needle?
No, not at all. If you look at the spending, we're spending more this year than we spent last year, and our deficits are bigger than they were last year.
So what do you think sort of about the argument that the AI revolution will allow us to outproduce our way out of this financial crisis?
It's certainly possible, but is AI going to change bedpans? Maybe, maybe we might have nurse robots. That'd be pretty cool. I mean, you don't get rich by betting against America. That's for sure. But I just don't think people realize how fragile our financial system really is. I don't think they have any idea. I don't think people really know how close we came to genuine Armageddon last week. If you put the kind of tariffs that he was talking about on our economy and our foreign creditors back out of the treasury market, the entire economy will completely collapse within 6 months. We cannot do business without foreign creditors and without foreign trade. Our entire economy is based on outsourcing all of our labor. We cannot immediately replace any of those supply chains. People making funny memes about Trump knitting his own Nikes. That's all real.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the bigger thing is we need our trading partners because that's how we sell our treasuries. We print money, we buy goods from them, they take our dollars, and then they finance our deficit. That's how it works. And it's going to take a very long time to reorder that financial system. You can't do it overnight.
How long would it take if say Trump wanted to do a serious version of the tariff policy and say, look, we're going to do industrial policy and do a 5-year plan, China style, to like bring back factories? What would it take to actually, or is it even possible we would give up the reserve status? We would get people employed. We would have to completely turn the financial system on its head. But is it even possible, or what kind of a long-term commitment would that kind of long-term commitment even be possible within our 4-year turnover life cycle that we have?
Okay, so I've been shorting shares of Boeing and shares of Bank of America. I've been shorting those companies because if Trump does what he's promised to do, there is no way to build an airplane in the United States. You guys have no idea the complexity of those components. These are global supply chains, and you cannot build an airplane without them. And if you tell Boeing that they're going to have to pay 30% more, 40% more to build their airplane, and they've already sold that airplane to someone at a fixed price, they'll go bankrupt. So
Do you,
that's just one example. But to try to get to answer your question is, if we didn't have why are we the world reserve currency? We're the world reserve currency because most of the world's central banks have their reserves in our bonds. They use our currency market, our bond market, as the foundation of their financial system. That the reason why they're able to do that is because virtually every commodity in the world is denominated in dollars, trades in dollars. So if you're Japan and you're trying to buy LNG or coal from Australia, you're paying in dollars. So that is why we're the world's reserve currency. If we give that up, if we fuck our creditors and they have to move out of the dollar and people start having bilateral trading agreements in Bitcoin, which by the way, they are now doing,
yeah,
then
Russia and China just exchanged
yep.
oil and
And
gas and Bitcoin.
I guarantee you, everyone would much rather have a trade obligation guaranteed in Bitcoin than guaranteed in dollars, especially because we keep fucking with the dollar system, right? We kicked Russia out of it because we didn't like what they were doing in Ukraine. We stole all of their currency reserves that we had in our banking system. Like, those are really bad ideas if you want to have your currency be the global reserve. So there's lots of reasons why we're not going to be the global reserve going forward. But the sure way to accelerate it is to start fucking with our creditors and our trade policy.
Are there any, let me ask you this way. A couple months ago, I was flying into Chattanooga, Tennessee airport. And in these, airports, they'll have like, here are our local companies. And they had a big display for Lodge cast iron skillets, the best damn cast iron skillets you can get. And I was thinking like, this is the made in America product, a big lump of metal. Unfortunately, they're a private company. I can't buy their stock, right? If we get tariffs, I'm going long Lodge cast iron, I guess, like on the secondary market. But are there any public traded companies that are fully supply chain US that would just be crushing it in this tariff environment now?
No, here's why. Who's going to buy the Lodge cast iron skillet if unemployment is at 30%?
People in the Hamptons.
It was so funny watching on X. Everyone was celebrating that the stock market people are losing their ass. Oh, that's good. Trump, 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 tariff, tariff, tariff. I'm like, yeah, that's great. I promise you, if the Dow falls 50%, you're all going to lose your jobs. 100% promise. So, like, we're all in this economy together. And the whole reason why we need free trade is because we need labor productivity. If you're making anything in America, you want to be able to source all your services and all of your parts as cheaply as possible so that you can deliver a product to America as cheaply as possible. Now, I have no idea where Lodge gets their iron ore or whatever their basic materials are, but they probably get them from Brazil or from Australia, from a mine somewhere else in the world. I don't know. I don't want to be on the record of saying that. I truly don't know. But if you're basic resources, you're probably getting them from Africa, from South America, or from Mexico. So even if Lodge is getting them from some other supplier, eventually the supply chain ends up at a mine in Brazil.
Yeah. What about this? So you've seen a split with Musk coming out against the tariffs. There's reports that Besant is sort of like the internal guy trying to chill things out a little bit. What do you think Trump is going to be able to pull the bulk of the Republican Party towards this tariff position with his kind of like psyops superpowers, or are there going to be enough Republicans that say, screw this?
Trump wouldn't have stopped if the Japanese hadn't started dumping treasury bonds. And as soon as that happened, Besant went to him and said, if this gets 200 basis points worse, Bank of America is insolvent. And I'm using Bank of America because that's actually a real thing. You can go look at their balance sheet. But it wouldn't just be Bank of America. The financial system around the world cannot afford, a 25, 30% haircut in treasury and 10-year treasury bill value because of the increase in yields. And I don't think, by the way, many of your listeners really understand that. People don't understand. What's the big deal? Interest rates went from 3% to 4%. Well, yeah, and the bonds just lost 30% of their value. And those bonds are what underlie your deposits in their bank.
But do you think Trump really, so this announcement, we're recording this on Thursday. Yesterday, that was the big day where Trump said, all right, I'm pausing some tariffs. Even with that pause, many economists are coming out and saying, look, we're still going to have 10 to 20x highest tariffs in the industrialized world. This was not really a blink. This was, we're still getting super high tariffs. We have markets on Polymarket about the overall aggregate tariff level this year that are still pricing in high probability that the tariffs go up severely. Do you think Trump really blinked yesterday?
No, I don't, and I really think that his tariff idea will fail. I don't know when or how exactly. Two things could stop him. One, Republicans in Congress could stop him, because I don't actually think it's constitutional for the president of the United States to dictate tax policy, and tariffs are taxes. That's Congress's bailiwick for sure. So I think that would be an interesting situation. But I think the other thing is just simply, really don't think that Trump actually understands how destructive tariffs are going to be to the economy. So let's say he is able to go forward and to implement tariffs, and let's say that on average they're 25% across the board. That would be an enormous tax hike on the American economy. It would lead us into a very severe recession. And Trump's saying that he doesn't care about that. But if it causes tax receipts to fall and the deficit to get worse, not better, then he would have to reverse policy.
Yeah.
Do you guys? I would challenge you, go study the history of 1930s, because the idea, it was, by the way, a Republican president, same idea. Oh, we're not going to tax you. We're going to tax our trading partners. Destroyed the economy. And what happened to government spending? It went way up.
Mm-hmm.
And so did all the debt and deficits, because if you have 15% unemployment, just imagine what the income security payments are going to be from the feds.
Right before we came on, I was listening to a podcast that Steve Bannon did. We're trying to get Steve on. Steve, if you're listening, call me. But Steve said that the US companies are going to eat these tariffs and not pass on price increases to the consumer. Is he wrong?
Yeah.
What's this going to do to inflation?
It's going to make it go up.
What do you think? All right, we have a market.
This is a recipe for stagflation. You're going to have everybody's costs going up, and you're going to have employment going down. So you're going to have lower GDP, and you're going to have a higher inflation rate. That's absolutely what's going to happen. And
what do you think the highest?
I'm sure Besson understands this, which is fascinating to me. I don't know what he's going to do to save his own reputation, but he knows this is not going to work. He also knows that Peter Navarro was a complete nut job. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I think the American people eventually are going to want to side with Elon, not with Trump. No one's going to like it when their 401k is down 30% this year. No one's going to like it when they lose their job next year. Talk about a debacle in the midterms if this continues.
We have a market right now in Polymarket. How high will inflation get in 25? It's like, the highest 1 month print above 3%. It's at 82% now. Above 5%, it's at 27%. Above 6%, 21% odds. What do you think we top out at this year?
And I don't think inflation this year will be the issue. I think inflation next year will be the issue. It will take time for these tariffs to filter through the supply chains and to impact things. And at first, what they're going to do is actually just there won't be any supply. So for example, no one cares about this, of course, but I saw that Porsche is just halting all US business. They're not going to sell any cars because they can't afford to. They can't afford to pay the tariffs and let their customers buy the cars at the prices that were advertised. So they're halting all shipments. So that'll go on for 3 months until people realize what's happening and it gets finalized. And so the big price increases won't hit until at the very end of this year, early next year. But I think I'm positive if you see a 20% tariff rate on the U.S. economy, you will see inflation next year over 10%. No question.
Porter,
how are you gonna sell Treasury bonds with 10% inflation rate?
So, Trump was supposed to be the second coming of Ronald Reagan, and yet it seems like they are running diametrically opposed policies. How do you think people, A, do you think people understand that? And B, when do you think people will sort of make the connection that these guys are actually completely different?
It's just impossible to know because I just don't have any idea what Trump is actually going to do, and neither does anybody else. But, look, in the last 6 months, the Dow Jones is down 7%, which is nothing. Nothing. So maybe this is all a big to-do about nothing. Maybe this is about getting better opening markets for American products. I mean, if you go to Japan and you say, we're serious, we're going to put in big tariffs and we're going to make it impossible for you to do business in America unless you really open your economy to ours. And that means not just tariffs, but non-tariff trade barriers, which Japan has plenty of. Then, you could it could work. There's no reason that Trump won't be successful at this. It's just the way he's gone about it has been so ridiculously poor.
Mm-hmm.
The financial markets are not happy. But what if Trump actually is able to expand American exports next year by 20% by lowering non-tariff barriers in Europe and Mexico and Japan? That'd be great. And we could definitely afford to pay higher taxes on Chinese imports if we had that. No problem. So I can't judge his presidency versus Ronald Reagan's because he's only been president for what, 90 days? Like, we got to see what happens.
Well, this is term 2.
Right. Okay. Well, his first term, I think he did a very good job, except for when COVID hit. And I can't really blame him for doing what he did in COVID because at that time, nobody really knew any better. But his first presidency was a pretty good time for America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
By the way, he's not a small government Republican though. He's not Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, that much is clear.
Let's go to China because I think we had some interesting markets earlier in the week that ended up playing out. We had markets like, will Trump reduce tariffs on many countries, most of the countries, and then will he increase them on China? And we said it was more likely to reduce on other countries and increase on China, and that's exactly how it played out. So it looks like now Trump is kind of increasingly just focusing in solely on renegotiating the relationship with China as part of this. He's at like 125% tariffs now. I don't know what the latest is. It might be 200% by the time we're done recording this. But how do you see this China trade war playing out?
I actually am very much in favor of a trade war with China. And not because I like tariffs at all. I don't. But because for the last, 30 years, China has been stealing our technology again and again and again. And then taking it from us, building products, selling them back to us. And that even happened with AI, with DeepSeek. I don't know exactly what they stole, but they stole something. And that's got to stop. It's crazy to me that we educate their people. We teach them all of our high technology. We allow them to steal all of our corporate espionage that they do all the time. And then we allow them to sell those goods that are full of stolen IP into our own market. That has to stop.
Do you think, can we do it so abruptly?
It
kind of feels like, it's like someone's a heroin addict and you can't just take them off cold turkey.
That's my big concern. And when his first term, he definitely moved supply chains away from China, including my razor business. We used to make our razors in China. We moved our supply chain to Mexico because of his first term. So there's a lot of companies that have already moved supply chains, into Vietnam and to other places because the obvious coming trade war with China. So I think maybe we're already there, but I really don't know. I'd have to study that in a lot more detail. It's a great question. And one thing I will definitely happily agree with is the way that the Trump administration has gone about all this stuff is bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers that you unveil, massive tariffs that are individualized, designed to stop all trade with every country in the world, and you unveil them without any warning. It's absolutely crazy.
It's absolutely
and the Canadians are the most. The Canadians are the most pissed off of all because they're saying, "Hey, you're putting tariffs. You're trying to renegotiate this deal that you yourself negotiated in your first term." I think they have every right to be outraged about that.
I agree. It's just very counterproductive. I think we would have been a lot better off if he said, "Listen, these are the things. These are my concerns, and this is the roadmap. And you've got all the time in the world to come negotiate a bilateral agreement." But the clock will strike midnight on October 1st. And then everyone knows what's coming. Everyone knows what the rates are going to be. The companies have time to figure out their supply chains. I don't know why. I don't know why he didn't do that.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk Bitcoin. I know you're a Bitcoin bull. You, from my understanding, believe that, after the dollar collapses, we're going to a Bitcoin world. Do you think that the belief in Bitcoin as a currency, as a mode of trade is viable from a belief standpoint? Are there enough globally who believe the thesis that will enable that transition?
I don't think really, I'm not trying to parse words with you, but I don't think that belief has anything to do with it. It's a fact that Bitcoin is a vastly better reserve currency. It's a vastly better way of settling a trade because you can do it digitally, you can do it instantly, and it isn't anyone else's liability. It's better than gold. And if we have a global trading system with Bitcoin as its foundation, we will have fair trade. Our trading partners think that we don't trade fairly because every time we owe them money, we just print them more dollars.
Right. Right. It still feels like there's a confidence game that needs to be played, right? But that needs to play out before we sort of move into this universe. Is it something that, I can imagine it happening slowly, right? Like Russia and China just settled some of their oil trades in Bitcoin, and so we're already starting to see it sort of enter into the economy. But
Yeah,
if
but
we
let
sort
me
of,
ask you this: what if people will just see it happening? Like, what if El Salvador is the new Dubai, and it's
Mhm,
that way primarily because they have Bitcoin as the foundation of their banking system? It means success will lead to more people adopting it. That's what will happen, and it is a vastly superior reserve currency.
mhm,
People don't know anything about Gresham's law. They don't know anything about monetary economics. So they're like, why don't you pay for a haircut with it? Because you don't have to.
right.
The more valuable currency will always be hoarded. It's the reserve currency. And I don't think I just I can't imagine that a more widely accepted, better system displaces it because it's very, very good at its function, which is as a reserve currency. And it's much better than gold.
Mhm,
So I think that the world will get there in time, and I'm sure it'll be leaps and starts. But I
mhm.
think it'll happen much faster than you think because, like I said, I think we're going to default in 4 years or less.
Last thing I got for you. What are you buying?
Glad you asked. I run a really unique portfolio where I own stocks, I own bonds, I own gold, and I own Bitcoin. And I keep those sort of things in balance, and I'm levered. And so this has been a really good week for me.
You're holding stocks and bonds in a world where you think the whole economy is going to collapse. The American system is going to,
Yeah, because I'm trying to have an ultra low vol portfolio. So those things are deliberately hedging internally. And I don't own bonds directly. I own bonds through very high quality insurance companies, property and casualty insurance companies, where I also get a lift from good underwriting. And they're actively managed. So they're moving all those durations short term. So I think the average duration of my bond portfolio, which is a look through the equity shell, is probably under 3 years. So it's short term, high quality fixed income. And then I have ultra low vol equities. So, my largest position is Hershey, ultra low volatility stuff. And you pair all that with gold and Bitcoin, and it's a really low vol, high alpha vol portfolio that I can lever. And I've been getting, volatility under beta one, so under the S&P, with 15 to 20% annualized returns.
What's the breakdown of those four buckets?
It's annual rebalancing, 25, 25, 25. So 25% equity, 25% bonds through insurance companies, 25% Bitcoin, 25% gold.
Porter Stansberry, you've been super generous. I know we ran a bit over, but thank you so much. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
You can go to portersjournal.com. It's where I publish a free e-letter. You can also look up, just Google me. I'm not hard to find.
All right, man. Thank you so much. This was a fun one. Really appreciate it.
thanks,
Yeah,
Porter.
guys. Thanks you for having me. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
Nothing in today's episode has been financial, investment, legal, or any other type of professional advice. Anything provided is for informational purposes only and is not meant to be an endorsement of any type of activity or any particular market or product. Terms of service on polymarket.com prohibit U.S. persons and persons from certain other jurisdictions from using Polymarket to trade, although data and information is viewable globally.